Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Hope you're all keeping well. So this is our fourth and last one for this week training session that we're delivering as part of a 6-week program. Dara delivered a session on refresher for existing staff, I guess, earlier today and yesterday. And I suppose you'll be able to find any of those archived on YouTube if you want to catch up with them or to kind of fast forward into particular parts of them. As with everything that we're doing training wise, it's basically archived onto YouTube for further viewing. So I'm going to get on with what we're doing today. We're looking at getting set up specifically for new staff. And that's basically looking at two tools in particular, they're Canvas and Zoom. So for anyone new to MTU, you're very welcome. And I guess if you need to know anything, I suppose it's those two tools that we use primarily in our e-learning infrastructure and for remote teaching. The two of those tools are Canvas and Zoom. Now in Canvas, we're going to be kind of just looking at how to structure and organize your module initially. We're also going to be looking at accessing your modules and looking at communicating with students. I suppose that's one of the first things you do using Canvas, and then also looking how to upload files into Canvas learning materials. Then we're going to look at Zoom. So Zoom is tightly integrated into Canvas. It is our live virtual learning platform. And that there you're able to kind of deliver live classes and record them if you wish and have them archived and viewable for your students on Canvas. We're just going to look at the basics of scheduling and setting up Zoom classes. And we're also just going to talk briefly about a few things that you need to know there with Zoom. One of the first things I'd like to maybe show new staff in particular is this diagram here. And this just gives us an idea of the different tools. So it's not just Canvas and Zoom. There are quite a number of other tools there as well, or features. I suppose at the heart of it all is Canvas. That's our virtual learning environment, but you also have other periphery tools such as H5P, which will be covered in a later session. That's for delivering or for creating engaging learning content in HTML5 format. So that's all, I suppose, in that on-demand quadrant there. And there's also other things like Screencast-O-Matic, which we'll be covering. That's a screencasting tool that lecturing staff have licenses for in MTU Cork, and you'll be able to use that to create asynchronous learning content if you wish. I suppose apart from that kind of core, that molten core of the offering of e-learning infrastructure in MTU, we have all of these other features kind of radiating around that, and that is the features of Canvas, which are things like assessment, communication, and sort of engagement and kind of monitoring tools there. And we also then have, Turnitin, which is an anti-plagiarism tool. That's also well documented and will be covered at a later date as well. But if you want to find any more about that, you can go to our guides and I'll just show you where they are at the moment. E-portfolios, we're also working on those currently, so there'll be probably some communication out to staff and students later in the semester around initial pilots around portfolios. Then in terms of communication, there's Zoom, obviously, which we'll talk about, but then you have all of these other apps that are used. So Microsoft Teams for you as a staff, a new staff member would be our kind of staff collaboration tool or communication tool. So that you'd see used for staff to staff communication. It has nothing to do with Canvas or e-learning. Really, it's more a communication tool in MTU, and you'll see that being used also for things like course boards later on, where externs are given access to content, etc., etc. And then email obviously isn't going nowhere, so that's staff email. I suppose we're hoping, in with Canvas that we're reducing really the amount of email that's dealt with at all, and that you can focus on email as a sort of maybe a productivity tool rather than anything else, you know. So when you're looking at Canvas and Zoom and all of the other periphery options here, really they should cover you in terms of communication and collaboration, assessment, and communicate and assessment and other sort of features around what you will be doing in your everyday as a lecturer. Just to kind of hone in on Canvas and Zoom, then we have, I suppose, this shows how tightly integrated Canvas and Zoom are. Canvas being the virtual learning environment and Zoom being the live collaboration tool, live classroom tool. And I suppose when you look at the different parts of this diagram here, you can see how, for instance, the Zoom features can be used to complement the Canvas features. So you can look at Zoom discussions in the form of teacher and student in class question and answer sessions, discussion and debate. And then you can also look at, you know, the stuff in Canvas that can facilitate that. And also just, I suppose, any of the other features that kind of work hand in hand together. Zoom integrates quite tightly. We'll see that in a minute in Canvas. It integrates in terms of the posting of recordings into Canvas, but also any classes that you schedule are available in the calendar in Canvas as well for your modules. So without further ado, I suppose the next thing to do is to jump into the Canvas environment. We're going to keep this session around 40 minutes. I think that's worked well for us so far. And we kind of use maybe the remaining time as a Q&A section. But I suppose don't worry, there'll also be kind of clinics coming up from I believe week 3 onwards, we'll be kind of having workshop clinics with staff. And that's basically to check in with you and to maybe look at what's working and what's not and any questions that you may have. And so they're good opportunities to talk about specific features or tools or methods that you're looking to achieve for your teaching in MTU. Okay, so let's hop into Canvas. So Canvas, initially, you're going to see your dashboard. To log into Canvas, if you're not already after doing that, you go to cit.instructure.com and you can log in using your staff credentials, your email, and your password. So they're the same credentials that you use for all of your MTU, I suppose, applications. And they all work from IDP, which is a central sort of identity management system within the university. And you have access to all of those other things like the library and all of those other features as well through the same credentials. The same goes for Zoom. So your same MTU kind of credentials will work for that as well. So once you do log into Canvas through the desktop, it's just maybe worth noting as well that you have the ability to download a mobile application, which is called Canvas Teacher, and Canvas Teacher can be downloaded from the Play Store or from the Apple Store for your smartphone or tablet. And maybe it's a useful thing, maybe just in terms of communication and collaboration and just getting notifications of things. I wouldn't be using it as the primary platform for doing all of the, creating learning content, etc., etc. It's more, as we say, maybe the pulse of what's happening in your modules. So when you come into your dashboard, you may see announcements. So announcements are basically pushed down at university level. So there may be things that are worth noting, advisories, guidance updates, and they can be anything from, Zoom related here, which is just talking about a change in authentication to Zoom, but also then anything, that's relevant in terms of teaching and learning with technology in the university. So in your dashboard, you can obviously, once you've read something like that, you can dismiss it and you can view other announcements if you wish later on that have been archived. And what you'll see is a list of your published modules and your unpublished modules. So initially, I guess, if you haven't used Canvas, you're going to see a lot of unpublished modules. What I'll do actually is I'll unpublish this just to show you what that looks like. So if I go back here, you're going to see unpublished modules. Basically, these modules come from a system called Banner, and the enrollments come in from Banner. And Banner manages all of the student enrollments, staff enrollments into Canvas, and those updates happen a couple of times a day. So typically, if a change is made in terms of enrollments of staff or students on any modules, those changes happen within the day, within 24 hours. So those changes, if you have modules that you're not seeing in Canvas, you need to get onto an email address called webforfaculty@cit.ie to request that detail. And if you're in doubt, just email us on tel.team@cit.ie. So the unpublished modules are the modules that you're enrolled on, but you haven't published yet. And if they're not published, your students can't see it. So that's one of the most important initial steps, is to go into your unpublished modules. And perhaps first of all is to set it out in terms of structure. That's what we might do first. We might just look at it and see what we can do just to get us up off the ground. So I suppose when you're starting to lecture in MTU, you're going to have a good idea what you're going to do and what your maybe weekly plan is, or your plan for the semester. So one of the first things with Canvas, maybe I'm just going to look at with you, is maybe just the interface. So in terms of the interface, you have your global menu here on the left. So that just covers your dashboard, your modules, your calendar, and your inbox, which is kind of the equivalent of email. And then there's other options here in terms of history, which is just shows you kind of what you've done. And then the commons is a kind of a common area at university level, but also for all Canvas users where you can kind of share content. So it's kind of a kind of a library where people can share and interact around content. The help menu here is quite important, maybe just in the first instance to flag with you. So if you go to the help menu, this will show you a number of key ways in I suppose, to get help in MTU. In regard to Canvas and to Zoom, actually. So you can see you can submit tickets to Canvas. So what we have as a university, we have the service called Tier 1 support. And Tier 1 support basically means that we have 24/7 access to support for staff and students, basically across a number of channels. So they are submitting tickets, which is the equivalent to maybe sending an email, but you also have the ability to use web chat and phone, and there's this toll-free number here that you can ring. Now, because all of these, I suppose, services in this current pandemic are experiencing a surge in, I suppose, in the number of queries that are coming in, particularly around the start of semester, we would suggest that you look at two primary ways of contacting support, Tier 1 support, and they would be web chat and telephone. And failing that, if you do have something urgent, please do touch base with us, and I'll kind of flag up some of the details there afterwards that you can use. But in the first instance, this is a good place to search for anything relating to Canvas. So there's Canvas guides. So these guides are updated very regularly, and they'll cover any feature within the Canvas environment in great detail. So they're very well documented. And then also you have just the other channels there. And this facility is open to students and to staff. So, it's used quite a lot, and this would be your first port of call really in terms of support. So that's the help menu. Then you get into the bones of the module structure. You have your main menu here. So that's home, right up to settings. And it's one thing worth noting, I suppose, is this sort of structure in terms of the menu and other things that you're going to notice in each module are all sort of pushed down through this technology enhanced learning template that was developed by this department. And that basically makes sure that everyone has the same menu and the same feature sets available within their modules. One of the most important things being Zoom, which is up on the top here, but also there's a feature called Syllabus, which is a nice feature as well within each module. I'll go into that in a second. So once you look at your sort of module menu, so you have your global menu here, your main module menu on the just the right of that there, and then you have your sort of your stage area, which is where you put in your content, your learning content. But also at the top of it is a useful sort of recent announcements area. So this typically shows, I think, about two of the most recent announcements. So for students, this is a nice thing to have, to be able to see the most recent announcement relating to this module, and they're in context, I suppose. And then within the I suppose the main stage, as I call it here, this is where you host your content. So one of the first things you're going to do is maybe look at adding units, and units are all they are is just containers for content. You can think of them maybe as folders as well. If you go to the add unit button, what we typically advise people is to work within the weekly structure of the semester. So a semester is 13 weeks. We're in week 1, so we might start with week 1 here. And the week 1 content then is going to be the container for, or the week 1 unit is going to be the container for the week 1 content. Then we can actually add files, or we can add other things like assignments and so on. So one of the first things you might want to do is share some learning materials in there. So we might go to choose something that's on our desktop, our computer, or if we want to, we can go to this plus symbol here and we can actually select from other content, or we can get previous content as well if we want to. So if I go to file, I have something that I uploaded into the module earlier. If I go to add that item, it'll add that item in there. Just a quick tip for you, I suppose, if you're kind of hosting out or delivering any written documentation and stuff like that, PDF format is a good place to go, I think, in terms of what you share, rather than things like Word or maybe other proprietary formats. PDF works well in the browser. It's also printer friendly, and students can view it inline, and they can download those files and view them basically on mobile or whatever. So PDF is a nice kind of accessible format for any kind of reading materials. And then the other thing to note, I suppose, is you'll see this green symbol here, which is indicating that this item is published. So I mentioned earlier that the whole concept of publishing, and publishing is important in Canvas. So basically, if an item isn't published, a student won't be able to see it. So there are 3 levels of publishing in Canvas. You have the module, which is something you just do once. So if the module status is unpublished, it'll mean the students can't see it at all in their lineup, in their dashboard. So it's important to say that the first thing you would do is you would publish the module, even if you don't have any content in it yet, because that way students will be at least be able to access it and know that they have been enrolled on it. So that's the first thing you do, and you only have to do that once. Then the second thing you need to do is look at the second level of publishing here, which is the unit level, or in our case, your week. So again, this needs to be published in order for students to see what's inside in it, or to see it. So if we click on the publish icon in here, it'll mean we have a nice number of green ticks here indicating that 1, 2, 3, we have the module published, we have the unit published, and we have the item underneath that unit published. So publishing is quite an important concept to get to grips with within Canvas. It's just really a way of releasing content when you need to. For instance, if you did want to lay out your whole module here from week 1 to week 13, you could actually have your stuff lined out without publishing it. And that means then that you can just kind of start to drip feed it if you want to. If you want to get more adventurous again, you can actually have release conditions and stuff, so you can release your content when it's needed. So for instance, if you wanted to release your content in week 2, you could arrange that as well. So they are a couple of the most important concepts within Canvas to begin with. So your module, you've published your item or your unit, which is a container for content, and then your item within that. The other thing to look at, and we haven't really set up anything in there yet, but we might just really do it really quickly. So if you wanted to set up an assignment, and don't worry, there'll be more on assignments and that later on. But if you wanted to just set up briefly an assignment here, we could just look at setting up, let's say, just a basic file submission sort of an assignment. And the reason I want to do this is to show you how this will show up in the syllabus content. So if I go to, say, assignment 1, week 1, and your description in here, and you can obviously add more in there. Good to have a description in around your assessment. Obviously, you'll have some sort of a brief. You might put an abstract of the brief in here and typically attach it as a PDF then as well. The number of points usually is 100. Again, don't worry about this stuff right away. There will be more on it. And if you want to learn more about assignments in general, please do check in on our help guides, and I'll show you those in a minute. We're just going to set this up as a file upload. So, and if you wanted to restrict the types of files, types that were used here in the upload, you could. I'm just going to leave that open. I'm going to leave it open to unlimited attempts for now, and I'm just going to say it's due on, let's say next week. We'll say the 3rd. Okay, and if I save that and publish it, that's going to save and publish the assignment into the assignments area for everyone. Obviously, you'd be a bit more descriptive about that assignment in here. But what I'm going to do is go back to my home, and typically you want to lay out, add the assignment in here as well. So I'm just going to go and add assignment, and I have week 1, assignment 1, week 1 in there, and then it shows up in here. But what I wanted to do is just go back to the syllabus. So the syllabus is a really really useful tool for the students. So the module syllabus will actually show up any date listings within the module, and they'll relate to something like an assignment due date, which we've just done there. Also, you'll see a previous sort of a calendar entry in there, and that's actually a class. I'll talk about that in a second there. But anything that's date related, so it would be a Zoom class that you might be setting up. It would be an assignment, or it could be things like meeting schedulers. So there's a meeting scheduler tool within Canvas that allows you to do kind of like doodle polling, the equivalent of doodle polling with your students. So for students, the syllabus is really useful because it just gives them an idea of what's coming up. So typically you might, add some date related stuff at the beginning so they know what's happening for the next week or two. And then obviously maybe use the communication tools to support that as well. So on that subject of communication, one of the first things that you might do is actually add a bulletin or announcement to your students in the module. And this might be just simply even just introducing yourself before your live session, if you're delivering a live session, and just talking about maybe what's coming up or what's happening in the particular week or a few days. So if I go to the announcements tool here, and you'll see these tools are grouped kind of by theme. Maybe the first one is an exception to that, being Zoom, because that is probably your go-to live classroom tool right away. But all of the other then is kind of the themes down here around content, assignments or assessments, and then communication, collaboration, and then everything else down here after that. If I go to announcements rather, if I go to plus announcement in here, this just shows this WYSIWYG editor, rich text editor. And all that is just gives you a description and a kind of a body field here. And what you'll do in an announcement is you'll just add the topic of the announcement, so that the topic title being, say, we'll just call it maybe week 1 introduction. And you can write your message in here, or if you want to be a bit more adventurous, I suppose, with the content that you're creating here, you could also actually record a video message or an audio message into the announcement, and that'll go out to your students. You can also add other media in there if you want to. But this rich text editor is actually common across all of the different content types that you're going to engage with, including assignments and so on within Canvas. So it basically is something like you'd see in a Word processor like Word or Excel or something like that, where you have these formatting options, but you also have other kind of media options in here. So if you were to put in your introduction in here, you might just, I'm going to say body text in here. Obviously, you're going to write your welcome message in here. You have some other options in here, including delay posting. So delay posting allows you to just hold off that post until a particular time and date. So you could kind of stage it for later in the week if you wanted to. And then you can save that out. And once that's saved, that announcement goes out to all students that are enrolled on that module and any other lecturers that are enrolled as well. So the benefit of announcements is that you get to kind of, push out a message to everyone relatively quickly. And you also get to use that feature if you want to in the teacher app. So that's one of the advantages of the teacher app, I suppose, is that you have that in your pocket and you can see any interactions in terms of communications on a module or modules that you have enrolled to you in Canvas. So they are a few of the main things to look out for as a new user in Canvas. So you're looking, first of all, at maybe just getting familiar with your menu. The inbox is an area that you'll maybe use from time to time, and that's the equivalent of webmail. I mentioned, that we're trying, I suppose, everyone is trying to reduce the amount of emails they get. One of the good things about Canvas is that you can change your notification preferences, and that you can use the inbox in Canvas just to basically, that's all, any communications that come to you through the module are hosted in Canvas and they don't have to go to your email. I think the default is that they go to your email and they go to Canvas. But if you ever want to change the notification preferences, you can go to your account here, notifications, and you get basically all of the different options here in terms of what you're notified about to your email. Okay, so they're just a few of the main things with Canvas to begin with. We're just going to move on to Zoom right now. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my main menu in here and go into the module that I was just talking about. So this is the Canvas introduction one here. And Zoom is, as we mentioned a while ago, the live e-learning platform for students and staff. So basically all staff and students within the university have pro licenses for Zoom. So one of the first things you'll need to do is you'll need to download a copy of the Zoom meeting client. And I'll just show you here. So telcit.zoom.us is the URL for the time being for Zoom. So it's kind of the gateway to log into Zoom and to log into your account. And you'll be prompted to download the client if you haven't already. And one of the most important things, I suppose, in terms of getting your client, the meeting client, which is just a one-time download, but you do have to update it regularly. So Zoom pushes out updates to the Zoom meeting client very regularly, and they are both security updates, but also, more importantly for you, feature updates. So there are new features that come out from time to time and they get added to the client. And so that's the one thing you need to download initially, and then just keep it updated, and you'll be prompted to update the app anyway as well. But just something worth noting, I suppose, initially. Now, when you come to MTU as a new lecturer, you need to do what you need to do is sign in using your credentials first. They are your current CIT staff credentials, your CIT.ie email address and password. And what that does is it creates a licensed account for you, and you can go from there. We have a guide on all of that stuff. So if you go to our site, tl.cit.ie, if you go to the staff help articles in here, you have a whole section on getting started with Zoom, and that includes 5 steps to getting set up, the downloading the client, the signing in. And if previously you have a basic account or pro account that aren't within the university, you have the ability to switch them. And that's in there. You might just see an error if you have a previous account. So that's not a big deal. You can just switch it and then you use your licensed account from then on. The benefits of having a licensed account is that you can single sign on into everything, including Zoom and your Canvas, and then all of the benefits that you get from a pro license, including recording and unlimited time limits and all of that kind of stuff that you get with a licensed Zoom account. So I mentioned that Zoom and Canvas are really tightly integrated. So once you download the Zoom client, which you can follow the instructions here on installing and downloading, go back to Canvas, and once you've set that up and you've signed in and so on, once you go to the Zoom tab here, it'll actually load up the Zoom integration for you here. So this recognizes that you have a licensed account. It takes that content securely, so that identity securely, and you're able to see and schedule live classes for Zoom within Canvas. The real benefit in terms of the integration between Zoom and Canvas is that not only can you schedule your classes and have your students access them through Canvas, but recordings, if you do make recordings of your sessions, they'll be available in the cloud recordings area for students as well. The important thing to note, if you have any concerns, is that students can't download recordings. They're just available through here, and they're able to view them from within Canvas and also in the on their mobile app as well. So it's very nicely integrated, this tool. Students obviously get a different view to what you're seeing, so they can't schedule meetings in Canvas, but what they can do is they can participate, and then outside of Canvas they can set up their own Zoom meetings for groups, discussions and stuff outside of class time if you wish or if they wish, and you can encourage them to do so as well. So that's maybe just a couple of the main things in terms of Zoom. So it's very well integrated. The other thing I suppose I mentioned with the syllabus too. So if we schedule a class or a meeting, as Zoom call it, what we can do then is see that entry in the module calendar. So very neatly for students, they're going to be able to see what's coming up, what their schedule is. And I suppose that's very dependent on you and when you want to schedule your classes. So if I go into schedule a new meeting or new class, it actually auto-populates the title with the name of the module. Typically, it says optional, but if you do have any kind of description for your class to put in here, it's a good idea. Students kind of get an idea of what's coming up apart from the kind of the title. And then what you can do is you could put in your duration and your time and so on in here. Initially, I would suggest maybe creating just one class here rather than a recurring class, just so you can get to grips with the settings and make sure they all suit you. But by default, the settings out of the box here that are set up at university level are pretty solid, I think, and they allow you just to be able to schedule your class, to have the right people access it, and to be able to share that with your students then. So let's say we're going to schedule a class for, let's say, 4 o'clock today. We can say that's a 1 hour duration, and don't worry about the duration. That's just a kind of a guideline time. It's not going to cut you off after that 1 hour or anything. Your time zone is default, so that's Irish time. But if you're delivering from a different country, you can change that as well. And then the recurring meeting option is where you get to schedule something that recurs or reoccurs every so often. So that might be weekly or every couple of days or whatever, and you can do that through here. As I say, initially, I would suggest just creating an initial class and see how you get on with that before using the recurring meeting option. And the reason I say that is it's difficult to affect individual, I suppose, instances within this occurrence, if you get me. So if you had 13 weeks of content, it's difficult to edit any of that content individually. So I suppose the reason for doing this a single class is just so you can get used to the settings initially. Registration, you can ignore that. That's not required. Security is quite important. So security at university level, and you see a kind of a bulletin about this recently, is basically that, I suppose, in terms of the policy in the university, all users have to authenticate into Zoom. So the default is that all MTU users, that is anyone currently with the CIT, Chagas, NMCI, or MyCIT domains, so that's staff and student email domains or identities, can only access live sessions with the default setting. That covers all of the mainstream kind of class activity that's happening, and just ensures, I suppose, the level of security. There's another option here as well that's grayed out, and it's called the waiting room. And the waiting room is another security feature, basically, that puts people into the equivalent of a physical waiting room, and then you admit them when you need to. I suppose one piece of advice I would give you in terms of just getting used to that is really communicate or make it clear with your students, that there is a time frame within which to attend a class. So if they're entering a class, maybe make it clear that it's either a few minutes either side of a particular advertised time. So if we're looking at a 4:00 class, maybe we look at a time between 3:55 and 4:05, and we use that time to admit people into the class from the waiting room. The reason I'm kind of maybe suggesting that is you don't really want to be in a position where you're keeping tabs all the time on the participants panel and having to admit people right throughout the class. And I think having a communication out to your class about that is important initially, so that they know, I suppose, what window they have to access the class, and that they have their technology in line for that. The other thing is, I suppose, quite important in here in terms of security, is if you want to invite people outside of MTU, so that is non-MTU staff or students, people that don't have MTU identities, basically you can still give them access. There's a second authentication option in here called all authenticated users. Now, all authenticated users will allow all MTU staff and students to access the class, but it will also allow those who don't have those credentials. So basically, it means that someone has to be signed into a Zoom account, and they just have to have a basic account. They don't have to have a pro account, and that Zoom account doesn't have to be within our organization. So why that's really important as a feature is because we have a lot of external speakers coming into the university virtually, and that all authenticated users option allows them to be able to participate. And where you want to as well, you can actually add them as sort of co-hosts or co-speakers. So, there's going to be a bit of interest probably in that setting. I wouldn't suggest it as a setting for all classes, only when you really need it. And again, just to make sure, to be sure, in terms of security, when you're dealing with external participants, it's recommended to use the passcode option in here. So the passcode option just basically means you're putting in a password or passcode for that session. And basically then that the users that are accessing that from outside of the university have to enter that code. So, you know, you would have something strong in here. And then once you've saved that, that'll be available to your internal audience, and you have to share that then with your external audience. So that's the all authenticated user option, primarily, as I say, for external speakers. The other options here are probably worth avoiding. Well, definitely worth avoiding is the personal meeting ID, because your personal meeting ID really is not something to be used for classes, for live classes. The personal, meeting ID is something that it never changes, and it's more attached to your personal, your individual licensed account. So it's not recommended to use that for security reasons, because that doesn't change. But what you may want to do is to set up a class that it automatically records. So if you are recording your content, which you're not obliged to do, but if you are, you have the option to record it automatically once it starts. You can add alternative hosts, but those hosts have to be within the university. So they would be staff or students that you want to have as hosts on that particular class. So once I save that out, that's going to show what I've set up there. So I get I can copy the invitation for those external participants and give them the passcode. And basically, this is something you don't need to share with internal people, your staff, or sorry, your students that are on the module, because they'll see that when they go to Zoom, they'll see it as a scheduled class. They won't see the start or delete options, obviously, but they'll be able to join that class when it happens. And very handily, actually, when a class starts, you're going to see this kind of little a green light symbol showing that it's actually started, and they can participate in it and join in it. And because of that integration between Zoom and Canvas, all of that kind of enrollment stuff is taken care of. So students are authenticated into Canvas, that information is passed securely into Zoom, and they can participate then in the Zoom session through that area there. Also, they get to view the cloud recordings if there are recordings from here. And then as well, if they go to the calendar, and they'll see it show up as an item in the calendar. If I go back to the syllabus as well, then I'll see that's actually added to the syllabus as well. So if you've set up a number of Zoom classes for the semester, they'll show up here in your syllabus, and students get a very good idea of any time-based stuff that's happening within the module. Okay, so I said I'd keep it to around the 40 minutes. We're just about 2 minutes over it there. I'm just going to go back to a couple of my important notes here. So for you guys, Tier 1 support is worth looking in at. You can also email them if you don't want to go through the help menu in Canvas, support@instructure.com. Very important, I suppose, is if you need that kind of second level of support, get to us on tel.team@cit.ie. We have a team managing that during working hours, and that's a really good resource if you want any further support. But we do encourage you to go through the Tier 1 support first, just because of, I suppose, the number of queries we're currently getting through the semester. For any other IT sort of applications, so that's applications that are not within our e-learning infrastructure, but more, I suppose, core IT services like your email, like Teams support and other kind of technologies within the university, you can contact servicedesk@cit.ie. And for a sort of a one-stop shop for any sort of resources in terms of TEL, or technology enhanced learning, if you go to tel.cit.ie, there's a lot of really great resources in here in the remote teaching for staff, for teaching staff, where you get a lot of one-pagers and guides and tips and tricks in here. Also, you have student resources, and you also then have a list of any upcoming training sessions like the ones that we're delivering right now. They'll be advertised in here. Then I suppose the final thing to note is if you go to the staff help articles in here, you have a very, very active knowledge base here of anything to do with Canvas and Zoom primarily, but then you have other tools as well, like H5P or Screencast-O-Matic and other stuff like that. And also just some Canvas tips and tricks and so on as well. If there's something that you don't see in there, please just reach out to us again at that email address, tl.team@cit.ie. And we're always looking for feedback from you guys as well. If there's something that that's not there that you need, just let us know and we'll assist. So look, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to have just a quick look in the Q&A and just see if we have anything in here. Nothing in so far. I might just leave it there if that's all right. I don't think we have anything on YouTube, but look, it's not going to end there. If you have any queries, do touch base with us. And there's more training. We're just in week 1 right now, but there'll be 5 more weeks of training and a lot of stuff in between as well available for you. So until the next training session, thanks very much. Hope you're all doing well and getting on well in your first lecturing week at MTU, and we'll talk to you again.